honor and a privilege for me to have Michael Bean share with us today. Michael and Rocky Bean, they are the parents of our delightful Chelsea, and also Jordan. He married into the family, but I met Michael and Rocky Bean probably around 2001, 2003 in New York City, and where they came and shared at Times Square Church where we were at the time. And this couple, the stories that they have gone through and been through in Guatemala, Random House offered to write a book about their life. I mean, you talk about two singles living in the jungles of Guatemala, not knowing the other existed, and bumping into each other under a tree, and then they got married. You know, so singles, you don't have to be in a city with many people. You can be in a jungle and get married. Random House offered to write a book about all of the things that they have been through, some of the miraculous things that they've been through, and also a movie. And they turned it down because they did not want to glamorize the gospel. And they could have made millions out of this, but God has supernaturally blessed them beyond anything that they could understand by actually turning that down. And God said, no, my blessings don't have to come through books and movies. But they could have had an amazing movie. Michael, share your heart with us. You are a missionary extraordinaire. And this pulpit is open to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It's a privilege for us to be here. Rocky and I, we love being here, and it's supernatural. You know, our daughter came here, and she married Jordan, came here together and started working with you. And that was our intro into here. And it's just beautiful to see the paths of God and how God designs and opens doors for us as his children and as his servants. And as we embrace what God has for us, only God knows the blessings that we are entitled to. And it's kind of the topic of what I want to share this morning. The title is Destinations. You know, in our life, we have the GPS to get us to the next destination, and it tells us exactly when we'll arrive. You get on a plane. I noticed on the plane coming over here, it had a map, and it showed where we were in reference to where we left and when we would arrive and what the time is there, temperature and all that. And we live our lives with the destination just in front of us. And a lot of times in our lives, we think, I'm so frustrated right now. It's so difficult right now, the circumstances I'm living at. If I can just get into that college, if I can just get that job, if I can just make it to the next destination, everything will be beautiful. And you know what? We can live our whole lives going from point A to point B to point B to point C, and we go through the ebbs and flows of life and the difficulties and the stresses and the fears, and we never learn to embrace the journey. We can do that. I know I'm not the only one that battles with that, but it's difficult to just lay all that aside and say, God, here I am. Use me today. Here I am. And just embrace where God has us. One time, I was climbing a mountain in Guatemala, famished. No, I didn't bring any water, and I'm just climbing, and I see the top ridge. And if I just get to there, I know I'll be on a flat, level plain. There'll be resources, houses, water, something, only to get to that ridge and realize that's just the beginning of the mountain. That's just the ridge before the mountain. And life has always been like that to me. 1 John 2:17 says, "And the world is passing away along with its desires, but whoever does the will of God abides forever." And I submit to you this morning that the destiny that we all have and the destiny we need to set our sights on is not the one that's close. It's the one that he promises us that we will arrive into his arms one day when we get there. It reminds me when I went to Guatemala, I didn't speak the language. I was working at an orphanage building, constructing, and we were called to we wanted to dig a well, and this guy came out with a stick and walked around a little bit, and he said, dig right there. So we believed that, and we started digging a hole in the ground, and we went down and down, and we went 1 meter, 2 meters, 3 meters, 6 meters, 10 meters, 13 meters, and all of a sudden the ground started getting hot and humid, and we hit water, but it was hot water. It was a hot volcanic spring. But I learned to just trust God. I learned to just say, you know what, today, if I can just serve God. When we moved to the mountains of Guatemala, I was in the vast mountains, trees, and Rocky and I went there, and we had two different perspectives. Rocky looked across the endless mountains, endless trees, and she thought, oh, this is just fantastic. There's no church anywhere. There's no Christians anywhere. This is perfect. And I'm over there looking, and I'm saying, God, there's no people. All I see is trees and mountains and bushes. And I just kept pacing back and forth, but I kept saying, God, I'll come. Just tell me. God, I will come if you just say, come. This is my will for your life. All I needed was that, and God restrained from saying that to me. He restrained. He held that back. And I kept saying, God, show me a sign. And I never got a supernatural word from God, but I had this little image. It was like a staircase, and it was big and wide at the base, and it was like a cobblestone staircase, and it went up into heaven. And God said, this is your ministry in Guatemala. And I'm like, wow, that is so impressive. Look at that staircase from Guatemala all the way to heaven. And then God had to stop me, and he said, no, you misunderstood the vision. The staircase, the big magnanimous, that's me. See that rock halfway up the staircase, that one little rock in one of the steps halfway? That's you. I'm the staircase. You're that one little rock. And it was like, wow. But then he said, is that enough for you? Is it enough for you to be that one little rock in my plan and so I said, God, if my wife signs up for this, I will buy a tent and I will come back to this mountain. So I turned around, I walked over to Rocky, and Rocky, she sees me coming. Oh my gosh, what an opportunity we have here. This is beyond my wildest dreams. I'm like, wait a minute, are you saying you like this? Oh, this is beautiful. So needless to say, we bought a tent and we bought a chainsaw. We need a chainsaw if we're going to build a house. So chainsaw and a tent, we moved to the top of this mountain. And we dug in, and I started cutting trees down. We pitched a tent. We had one little faucet that came up for people to fill their jugs up and take it back to their little huts. And the water came from this freezing cold spring. And every day after work, I had to get down under that, turn it on, and it was just freezing cold. And the tent was beautiful when it wasn't raining. But when it rained, when it rained, the drips of water would come through the tent. We had a baby. We had a 6-month-old baby. And we had to put plastic over the baby bed to keep the baby dry. Sometimes the winds would blow so hard that in the middle of the night I had to get up. We had a little air mattress we slept on, and we'd zip down the little room, and we were inside this cozy little room. But the winds would blow so hard that we felt like the whole tent was going to roll over. So I had to go out in the middle of the night in the blistering rain and strap ropes over the tent to hold it to the ground and just keep it down. And, it was hard. It was difficult. But we finally, there were storms. There were fears, noises in the night. And I'd wake up and I would just say, God, can I do this? Can I do this? And every single day, God would give us a little more courage, a little more strength, a little more willpower to continue on. So finally, we built our little cabin. We had it set up. We had a baby room and Rocky in my room. And it was made out of wood and a little tin roof, and it would crick and crink and stuff. And the people sometimes had machete fights, so they'd come to us, and we'd sew them up, wounds that we'd sew up. And we knew if there were one wounded, maybe the other one would be coming. They would get in a fight with us, so we would make sure they stayed outside. And we worked on them. But anyway, at night, I remember hearing noises in the house and crawling through the little wooden cabin and with a flashlight because we had no electricity. So I'm shining to make sure everybody's okay. So we had fears to deal with. We had all this stuff to deal with. But yet, we knew that God had called us there. So we didn't know it, but as soon as we got our little cabin built, they had a plague of measles. They were dying because the secondary effect of measles is you get high fevers and you get lung infection. So the mom would come to us and say, our kids are sick, or one died last night, and the others are sick. And so I went to the hut, and all they needed was a shot of penicillin to stop the infection and let it live its course and pass. But they were so malnourished, the fever and the lung stuff would kill them. So I would go from hut to hut, and there'd be one dead or two sick, and so three that are not sick. So I'd inject the ones that were sick with penicillin, and we stopped that. It lasted months. And then after that, a wave of cholera came through. And they would bring them on a bamboo pole and a hammock, and they would carry them through the mountains to get them to us. And the dehydration was so severe, a 20-year-old would look like he's 60 years old or 70 years old, and they were just so dehydrated. But if we could get an IV in their vein, it would just fill them liters after liters of liquid, and it would just save their lives. And every single person, and there were about 60 that got to us, every single one of them survived. Wow. Every single one of them survived. And so there was wave after wave. But every time we had church services, nobody would get saved. Nobody would come forward. Nobody would to believe. And I would say, God, why is it so hard? Why is it taking so long? And it was like God showed me a vision of a train. How hard it is to turn a train if you wanted to change the direction of the train. How hard it would be to change the direction of the train. And if I would just stay faithful and just stay committed, that God would. He promised us. But imagine 10 years later, and we finally have a couple of people somewhat interested in the Word of God. Other missionaries would come up to visit us, and they'd say, there's no fruit. Shake the dust off of your feet and go on. Go on, serve. And we're like, we would. If God called us to leave, we would. But God has not called us to leave. He called us to stay, to persevere, to weather the storms. And 10 years later, we had a couple of guys over in the next village, and we were preaching. We walked to the next mountaintop, and we started preaching. And one of the guys leaned over to me and says, can I tell them the story when you came to our village? I said, sure, go ahead. You probably have never heard our side. And I said, no, I haven't. So he gets up there and he tells the other natives on the next mountain, he goes, when these missionaries came, we didn't know what to do. We didn't know if we should trust them or not. They pitched a little tent. They started building this beautiful mansion, with little stick house. To them it was a mansion. They built this wooden cabin in our village. We thought for sure they're here to do us harm. We thought for sure they were going to eat our children, or they were going to make soap out of them. We didn't trust them. They had no reference at all. So they're telling that village that for 3 years we were going to kill them. And we would get together and we would have meetings. All right, next Friday, we're going to do it. We're going to overrun their little cabin. We're going to kill them. And sure enough, he's telling a testimony. And sure enough, one of our children would be sick. This little kid named Johnny, the lady brought to us right before dark, and it was practically couldn't even breathe. It was so sick and so malnourished. He said, I had no alternative. I had to bring you this child. And I said, I can't promise you anything. I'll do the best I can. And I put it in my own little baby seat. And I took off down the mountain, four-wheeling down the mountains to civilization. And I would listen for the baby, and it would almost stop breathing. And I would reach back and shake the little chair to get it to gasp for air and keep it alive as I made it. I went all the way down, finally, an hour and a half later, made it to the hospital, ran in the hospital late at night, and they said, sorry, there's no doctor. We can't accept this child. It's too sick. We can't accept it. And I said, you have to. The baby will die. No, we can't. The third hospital I went to, finally, the lady said the same thing. And I said, ma'am, if you reject this baby, it'll die tonight. I cannot save this child. You can. You know what to do. And out of sheer inspiration, she said, oh, give me the baby. And she took it in and put an IV on it, and she put an oxygen tent on it and saved its life. But it took 6 weeks. It took 6 weeks to recover before we could take that child home. Little did we know that was postponing the time that they were going to kill us. Then we had cholera come through, and it lasted months. We had 6 people at a time on beds, and we'd put their IVs on, and we'd wake up in the middle of the night and change their IVs. And this went on for months and months. And they couldn't kill us because we were stopping the sickness and disease. But we didn't know that all this God's used just to keep us there long enough for them to be able to embrace the gospel. You see, in our lives, and many times in the illiterate villages that we work in, and sometimes even in your world, the only gospel that anybody will ever read is your life. It's your life. And you know, there's challenges and there's fears, and we could live looking for point B or point C in our life and frustrated and just trying to survive long enough to make it and miss the big plan, miss the big vision that God has for us. It's so beautiful to hear the story. You know Billy Graham. I read just the other day that Billy Graham they wrote this about him. As a result of his crusades, Billy preached the gospel to more people in person than anyone in history of Christianity. Everyone knows the name of Billy Graham. He counseled numerous presidents and governments. But I asked you, and this is a quote that he said, one of his most famous quotes. It says, when wealth is lost, nothing is lost. When health is lost, something is lost. But when character is lost, all is lost. And you know, everybody's heard the name of Billy Graham. But have you ever heard the name Howard Pugh? Probably not. I would venture that no one here has heard the name Howard Pugh. Howard Pugh was born in 1845, and he was an old man by the time he met Billy Graham. He was the one that bought Billy Graham's tent and encouraged a 20-year-old to pursue his dreams, to be all that God has called him to be, and that he would fund him, he would send him. And you know, we underestimate the value of a willing soul to let go of what God has given him and be what he is called to be. Howard Pugh embraced the greatest evangelist of all time. And I would be willing to bet that he died way before he knew what Billy Graham had actually done. And Billy was an evangelist. We are church planners. This is our 40th year that we've done this in Guatemala. We go to mountaintop after mountaintop, and we find villages that do not have the gospel. And we have a motto, based on our lifestyle. It's give them a reason not to kill you before you preach the gospel. Because there's no reason why they shouldn't kill you. You're going to come in there and you're going to move into their village. You're going to change the way they believe and the things they've been taught. And if you live long enough, they're going to read the gospel through your lives. So we believe, above all else that we do, that planting a church is the most important thing that we could do. And we know that even here in Geneva, you guys are working real hard trying to get your church built, trying to get it established. And I would be willing to bet that we have no idea all that God is going to do. Not only in your generation, in your lifetime, but in the future generations. I walk in our little churches that we build, and I sit down by all these new believers that I've never met. They're second generation or third generation Christians, the people that we've sent in there to preach the gospel. And they look over at me like a Martian from another planet, and I wave at them, rub them on the head. They are my biggest reward. They don't even know who I am. They don't know what we've done. And it doesn't matter, as long as they know Jesus. One time in my lonely, I was so lonely, missing home, missing food that I'm familiar with, missing all the family and blessings of being in my church. They invited me to go to the beach, and I was walking down the beach, just shaking with the sadness and being alone, out of my country, away from my people, that I fell to my knees, and I cried out, and I said, God, I'm willing to be here. I will serve you until you say. But when you're done, Lord, let me go home. And you know what the Lord said? He literally lifted my chin, and he looked deep into my eyes, and with all his compassion, he said, son, when you're done, I'm going to take you home. But he wasn't talking about Texas. He was talking about his home. That's our destiny. That's our destination. We moved into Montesano, 10 years, barely received the gospel. We hiked to the next village. We started over. Built another church up on stilts, and we dug in. And the storms and the winds and the hardships, and the little road that we had to get there was muddy, and it would wash away. And every day I'd have the men of the village meet me out on the road with my picks and shovels, and we would repair the road so we could keep it open. So if there were sick people, we could get them in and get them out, and we could go get supplies. And every night after working all day long with all the men, the rains, I would lay down in bed, and the rains would come again the next night. And they would flood, and I knew all that fresh dirt, all that hard work we did would be washed away. And one day, after several days of that, you probably have never done this, but I actually got mad. I got mad at God. I said, I cannot believe you. I cannot believe you. I don't mind working. I don't mind out there all day long digging in the dirt and with picks and shovels. I do not mind. But Lord, why does the rains come every day and wash the dirt away? He just said, so that you could be out there shoulder to shoulder with the villagers every single day. You got a captive audience right there every day with them. This is a dream come true for a missionary. And I'm like, okay, I don't mind. You know, when we got here, we went with Chelsea and Jordan to the youth group, and they discussed a verse in the Bible, and it was when Jesus preached to the thousands of people. he preached to 5,000 people, and I think it went on 3 days. And they hungered and they needed food, right? Remember the story? Well, can you imagine being his 12 disciples? They're tired. This is 3 days into this 5,000 crusade. They are tired. They're exhausted. Jesus pulls away by himself and gets some R&R and rest and, praise to the Lord. But the disciples are weary. And how are we going to feed them? I'm sure they're thinking in their head, how do we get these people to go home? Lord, there's no food there. We can't buy food. We need to have a plan. They're thinking God's going to send them on their way. He goes, you feed them. Us? Feed them. Well, all we have is 2 fish. All we have is a few loaves of bread. And the Lord did a miracle. And at the end of their strength, at the end of their weary journey of crusade time, he had them sit them down and feed them all. And now they are really tired. So that's not where the story ends. The story continues. So he puts them all in the boat, and he says, it says he put them in the boat, and he says, go across the other side. Now, he didn't go with them. And it was a beautiful sunny day as they looked out across the sea, and it was awesome, sunny. Let's go. So they started rowing. But no more than they got away from the shore, the winds came. And there was a headwind. So now they're rowing harder. They're already tired. They're exhausted. And the winds, and I'm sure they said, oh, he does all these miracles, and we're out here in this boat, and we're not making any headway at all. We're rowing, and the waves, and now we're fearful. And we're scared. And not only that, the nighttime comes. And now they're scared. And then I notice in the story that Jesus was just passing by as he walked on the water. So they would notice him. Oh, and they got all scared again. And don't worry, it's me. So he got in the boat, and it says immediately they were on the other side. They had been to point A to point B. Now they're at point B. And they thought, oh, thank God, oh, thank God. But if we back up away from the story, they're only at point B. In fact, point B is just part of the training. The seas, the multitudes, the feeding, the tiredness, the weariness. It's just the training for the real ministry. Hadn't even started yet. We read it as all, no, it's not. It's just training. And I wonder if the struggles and hardships that we go through, the job that we're about to lose, we are about to lose our job. Where are we going to go then? What are we going to do? I don't know about you, but I woke up one time. I didn't wake up. I was actually driving to a mission conference in Florida. And I started thinking about all the bills I have and all the people dependent on me. The children to feed, the pastors to support, the churches. All of this was so, my chest got tight, and I started breathing. I'm on the way to preach. And I'm overcome with anxiety and stress that you would not believe. And this is as if God jumped right up on the dashboard and said, really? Seriously? I brought you all this way. Are you now going to freak out on me? Right now? You're going to freak out on me like I'm not going to support you? You're not going to trust in me? It's just point B. It's not the destination. It's just point B. And I submit to you, if God is faithful all this time, if God is faithful today, he'll be faithful tomorrow. Feed the 5,000 and be quiet. Feed the 5,000. Do your job. And remember what Billy Graham said, the most important thing. Don't lose our integrity. You're where you are. You're going through what you're going through because you are the light of the world, and God believes in you. God believes in you. He is going to be big and strong through your life, through your job, through your ministry. Amen?